Welcome, everyone. Welcome. Thanks, everyone, for being here tonight. By now, this should be clear, but we're not going to be doing Michigan time in this course. So normally we will be starting at 6:30 rather than 6:40, as we often have in the past. Welcome, everyone, to Food Literacy for All. This is our third year, and we're really excited to have all of you here tonight. The goals of this class are really unique. We're here to learn from practitioners and activists and scholars working across the food system. We're trying to link multiple types of knowledge to foster food systems transformation. We want to increase diversity and inclusion within food systems education and practice. And this course is also aiming to foster university community partnerships and relationships. That last one is especially unique. There are very few courses on campus. I don't know that I actually know of one where there is a partnership with a community leader and that's co-designed with community leaders. So this team that I'm showing you here has been working since June to design this course. We've been meeting at least monthly for 2-hour-long meetings that honestly have been some of the most exciting and rejuvenating meetings that I've had in a long time. Meetings in academia can often be quite boring and tedious, but these have been really exciting. Identifying speakers, thinking about themes, topics that we wanted to include. So it's been a really exciting 6 months to work with these amazing women. I'm Lesli Hoey. I'm an assistant professor of urban and regional planning here at the university in Taubman College, and I do research on food systems. You'll hear a little bit more about me. This is the first time I'm one of the co-instructors for this course and have been part of the designing of the course. You're going to hear more from some of us later on in the course, but we each want to briefly introduce ourselves and say a little bit about what our role is in designing this course.
Greetings. I'm Chair Ann Hebron from Detroit. I am the Executive Director of North End Christian Community Development Corporation and run the Oakland Avenue Urban Farm. My role has been exciting in that the last 6 months we've worked together as a team to think about who the national experts and professionals we could bring to this class to share their expertise so that we all can learn. And it's been, like Leslie said, an exciting, very unique experience. So I'm happy to be here this winter with you and looking forward to everything that we can all experience together. Is that mine? You turn yours off, then I'll turn mine on. Okay.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. My name is Lilly Fink Shapiro. I help to manage and design this whole course. This is my third year being involved, so I've been involved from the onset, and every Tuesday night when this starts, this is my favorite part of my job. As Leslie was saying, these meetings have been invigorating. We've been working with this incredible team of women. So I manage the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative here on campus, and my favorite part of my role is that I get to kind of have one foot in academia and one foot working with our community partners. So glad to have you all here this semester, and you'll hear a little bit more from me later on. And then do you want to have, Anika, do you want to come up? Thank you, that's helpful. Sorry.
Now it's on. Hi, I'm Anika Vinile. I'm a graduate student here at the University of Michigan. I'm a dual degree, Master's of Urban and Regional Planning, and then also a Master's of Social Work. I am the program coordinator for the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative here on campus, and I've been helping with food literacy for all planning since probably August, September. So I'm really excited and can't wait for this class to get started.
Hi, my name is Elise Gahan. I am a Master's of Public Health and Nutrition student, and I will be the grader for the course, and I am the person that you should direct kind of clicker questions, attendance things, more broad course-related questions. And then also, if you do not have an iClicker today, you can see me after class to sign in on an attendance sheet.
And I'm Winona Bynum, and I'm the Executive Director of the Detroit Food Policy Council, and also a registered dietitian, so shout out to nutrition students. Detroit Food Policy Council, how many people have heard of food policy councils? I love it! So just when I started a few years ago, when I would ask that question, there would be maybe one hand, so yay. So great. My role with this program has been one of the community partners, again, meeting with everyone over the summer, helping to plan the class, and to think of what speakers would really be inspiring. One of the things I think about what helped me get started in this career was a class very similar to this. Connecting with community leaders and it was a seminar speaker series, because a lot of times you're thinking, how does what I do fit in with what I want to do, or making changes in the food system? So you'll see a lot of examples of that. This is our mission and vision. I won't read that to you, and our values. A few pictures from the Food Policy Council, some of our work and work of our partners. So all things food we work on, and looking at policies to really help shape our food system. One of our other roles with the program will be helping to connect this program with Detroit. So there'll be corresponding events in Detroit, and also we'll be bringing folks in on shuttles from Detroit to the class. So this is the schedule and the speakers that will have shuttles that will come to the class. So I'll be looking forward to seeing you over the course of the course. And this has been great, and been happy to be invited to participate.
Just keep it. So I want to do a formal welcome to all of the students in the room. Raise your hand if you're a student in the room. Okay, raise your hand if you are a community member, and before you do it, you say that, that means anyone who's not enrolled in the class. So you might be a student, but if you're not enrolled, we're calling you a community member for this class. Okay, great. So a bunch of you are not enrolled in the class. That is going to be how it's going to be every week. So this is a really unique course, because sometimes it's about half of you. We have about 150 or so students enrolled in the class, and then we have up to 150 seats for community attendees. So it could be half and half if we fill the class with community attendees. I want to do a quick reminder to everyone. Perhaps you already know if you're here, but the class, it's free, it's open to the public. Tell your friends, bring your parents, bring whoever you want. We just ask that you please RSVP online. It's really important for us to know who is coming to the class. So there's just a few quick questions. You can pick all the dates that you want to come for, and it's really helpful for us to know who's here and who's interested. So again, like I said before, I manage the Sustainable Food Systems Initiative on campus, and a quick overview of who we are. There's over 60-some faculty and staff who either research food systems or who teach courses like this one that are related to food systems. We have a minor for undergraduates. It's called Food and the Environment, and it's through the program in the environment, and we have a relatively new graduate certificate as well through SEAS in Sustainable Food Systems. So it's really exciting that you can actually formally now come to graduate school, or as an undergrad, you can really formally study food systems. We also have a whole slew of related courses that are available on the SFSI website. And we want to do a quick thank you to our sponsors. So this is a part of the food, it's been a little bit different every year. This year it's a part of the food systems theme in the School for Environment and Sustainability. So huge thank you to SEAS. We also want to thank the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, the Center for Latin American and Caribbean Studies, the Center for Engaged Academic Learning, and the Center for the Education of Women, specifically the Francis and Sydney Lewis Visiting Leaders Fund. So thank you to all of our funders. Okay, a few other things about this class that are unique than some. First of all, is anyone here into tweeting? Raise your hand. Do you tweet? Okay, we got 2 tweeters. If you too would like to tweet to the class, you can ask questions. It's hashtag food literacy for all. And if the 2 of you don't want to raise your hand, and if you just want to ask a question through Twitter, we will be monitoring that every week at the end of class when we do a Q&A. It's hashtag food literacy for all. Yeah. Yeah, so glad we have a lot of tweeters in here. Another thing is that we require, for all of the students involved, we require that you have an eye clicker. They look like this. As Elise said, hopefully you guys have them by class already. If not, please have them by next week. And we're going to use them each week to track your participation, because as Leslie will tell you, the participation in being here is a big part of your grade for this course. And also, as you'll notice, because we have video camera here, all of the classes are filmed and will be available if you're like, oh, that speaker was so amazing, I want to show it to my friend, or you want to rewatch something while you're cooking dinner. All of the classes will be filmed and available on the SFSI website soon after class. Also, if you do not want to be, if you don't want to be on any camera or any film, sit in that back corner and we won't get you. Okay, so get out your eye clickers. We just want to get a little bit more of a feel for who's in the room and practice using them. Community members, I'm sorry that you can't participate in this. There's been discussions of ways to, in future classes, potentially get you temporary eye clickers. We're working on that, so stay tuned. But for now, it's just students. Oh, do you want to hop up here? You can grab a mic.
If you need to sync it, the code for this box is just AA. So you hold your power button until it blinks, and then just type in AA, and then you'll be sending it to the right box. And let's make sure it's going. Oh, there we go. All right, so, yep, you're going in.
Okay, so click away. Who are you? We want to know who's in the class. Okay, we have 77% undergraduates, 22% grads, although I have a feeling that a lot of the grad students might not have their clickers yet. 1% PhD students. Okay, next question. And we got to get going. This is like practice round to get everybody warmed up. Can you close the box? Okay. Have you taken courses related to food systems before? Okay, so it looks like the majority of you, this is your first course, but we definitely have some experienced folks in here who've thought about some of these themes before. Great, let's keep going. Have you worked in the restaurant industry? I know that that's often an entry point into the food systems world for a lot of people. I've heard that a lot of people's first jobs is in the restaurant industry. Okay, almost half and half. What about who's worked on a farm here? Hey, Melvin. And what about, just real quick, show of hands of community, people who are not enrolled in the class, who's worked on a farm? Wow, cool, okay, great. And what about of the students? Okay, so 70 of you know, but 50 yes. So in this room, it seems like there's probably, I don't know, maybe 80 people or so that have worked on a farm. What about who's been out to the U of M campus farm? And if this is the first time when you see this question, if you didn't know we had a campus farm, this is you finding out that we do have one. And it's great, and you should all go visit. It's out by the Mathi Botanical Gardens. Okay, so everyone who's a no, hopefully that'll soon change to yes. All right, and we're also just curious where folks are from in the room. Okay, so, we got a lot of out-of-staters, some international students, some from Detroit, some elsewhere in Michigan, pretty good spread. Okay, this is, think hard about this one, but you gotta answer it as quick as you can. Which crops survive best in Michigan winters? Is it cherries, collard greens, winter squash, iceberg lettuce, or nothing can survive in Michigan winters? What do you think? And a lot of you said you had worked on a farm, so we'll see what you think. I just heard someone say it's called winter squash. Okay, it seems like a lot of you got fooled by the same thing that the winter squash. Hey, farmers, Melvin, you want to take this one? Call an answer. Iceberg lettuce fools people with the name. Jerry? Collards. All right. Okay, true or false? Michigan's agriculture is the second most diverse in the nation. You guys are right. Yes, it's true. We're second to California. We produce there's a huge amount of variety in terms of the crops that Michigan produces. Okay, we just have one or two more here. Okay, what do you guys think? How many farms or gardens are there in the city of Detroit? And granted, these are ones that you can count, so it's hard, it depends how you count it, but what do you think? Wow. Do any Detroiters or community members want to weigh in? Yes. Yeah, so you can see there's an organization in Detroit called Keep Growing Detroit, which tracks this every year, and this is a map of the city of Detroit, and each one of those is a different farm or garden. So there's so many. There's probably more than this too. Okay, so I want to give you a brief overview of the semester and who's coming. You'll see here that the course has already gotten a lot of great press because we are bringing so many incredible speakers to the city. So this is just a couple articles. But I'm going to go down the list and tell you who's coming each week. So starting next week, we're inviting Monica Ramirez, who is an activist and an author and a civil rights attorney. She actually just 2 weekends ago, I guess, she was, how the actors and actresses at the Golden Globes will bring along an activist to raise awareness about something. She was just at the Golden Globes. She's the daughter and granddaughter of farm workers, and she's sort of about combining farm worker justice, labor issues with the Me Too movement. And she's all about justice for migrant women. So she's going to be incredible next week. Can't wait for her. Following that, we have Chef Sean Sherman, who's an indigenous chef, all about, he founded a company called the Sioux Chef, S-I-O-U-X, and he's all about kind of revitalizing and bringing attention to native foodways and cuisines. Following that, we have Paul Greenberg. He's going to talk about fisheries and sustainable fisheries, and he's a New York Times best-selling author. You'll see his work all over the place, and these are the titles of some of his work: For Fish, American Catch, and the Omega Principle. After that, we're inviting Elizabeth Yampier. She is a Puerto Rican attorney and environmental climate justice leader. I was told that she kind of combines the food justice movement and climate justice movement, and that she's a real firecracker speaker. Afterwards, we have Anna Lape, who talks about sort of the corporate big spin on big food. She talks about comparisons of big food and big tobacco. She also talks a lot about food marketing, and specifically food marketing towards children. She's been involved in issues to put a soda tax on the ballot in California. Then we have a Stanford professor coming, Christopher Gardner, who is interested in all kinds of things. He's interested in connecting the world of nutrition to issues of climate change and animal welfare and human labor issues. And he's interested in making institutional food what he calls unapologetically delicious. We're bringing in Shirley Sherrod, former Georgia State Director for the USDA. There's a whole controversy surrounding her appointment. Perhaps you know about it. And she's an incredible advocate for especially black farmers in the South. And she's really quite well known and well spoken. Then we're inviting Samina Raja, who is an academic coming from the University of Buffalo, and she's a food systems planner and thinks about how to design cities to create thriving, sustainable food systems. And then we have Dara Cooper, who is an organizer with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and working towards Black food sovereignty and land justice. She's also written quite a bit about food hubs and about food hubs in the South, and is both an author. You'll see some of her readings on the syllabus, and she's going to also do an event in Detroit while she's here. So we have an incredible group of speakers, and we also have 3 panels that are interspersed. One of the panels is going to be focused on seeds, another one is about specifically on food waste, and another one is about school food and gardens. So that'll be a little bit of a different format because we'll have a table up here with 3 speakers, and we're drawing for more local speakers for those weeks. So folks from Ann Arbor, folks from Detroit, maybe you are some of the panelists in the audience. In fact, I see a couple of them, so thanks for being here. Those are going to be really great weeks too. Also, I just want to say a note to help draw the community members back is that we've been planning this course since the summer, and we've been really intentional. Even if we say we love their book, we love their work, but if they were not a firecracker speaker, if we didn't think they were an incredible speaker, then this wasn't the place for them. So basically everyone we're bringing we think is an incredible, engaging speaker. That's part of the goals of the class. So we hope that you will think the same. Great, I'm gonna invite Lesli back up here.
So I'm just going to go through a little bit of the assignments for students in the room just to make sure everything is clear, we're all on the same page. I think the syllabus should be pretty clear at this point now that we've gotten the Canvas issues worked out. The graded components mainly are based on your participation and your attendance. And then we also want you to put 10 Canvas discussion postings up. This is going to be right after the lecture, and you'll have until Sunday to just put up a short, very short paragraph on Canvas in the discussion postings about your reflections on the speaker. And also 3 reflective essays. You'll see on the syllabus that at 3 different points, this is about the 4th speaker in, reflect back on one of the 4 speakers that you want to think about a little bit more deeply and write a reflective essay about them and the reading that you did for them. And you'll do that 3 times. So just focusing on one speaker for each of those essays. And then there are extra credit opportunities too. We posted on there are opportunities for you to volunteer at D-Town Farms. This is the farm that is part of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network where Malik Hakini was the co-instructor for this course for the first 2 years of the course. Also with Oakland Avenue Farm, with Jerry's Farm, they're putting up a hoop house, which should be a pretty cool experience. So the dates that we have on there are the week they're putting up that hoop house and they need help. And then the other opportunity is actually with the Detroit Food Policy Council with Winona's organization that's hosting their annual food policy, or their food summit. And you can volunteer for that and also then attend it, which is a really remarkable summit I've been to in the past as well. The discussion seminar there's a few spots left, not many spots. This is for a much smaller group of students. Probably it'll stay around 15 students or so. And this is for students who want another extra credit one more credit. The Tuesday lectures, this class is 2 credits for you. But if you would like to go a little bit more deeply into the lectures that you're going to hear, and you'll have to do a little bit more reading, so bringing in more context, we want to especially think deeply about how we take whatever the issues are that these speakers are bringing to our campus, how do we take those ideas and think about how we apply it for urban planning, for policy, for action. And we're going to have 2 faculty from Chiapas, Mexico with us, so we're also going to be trying to think about how a lot of the topics that we're going to hear have some kind of comparison to global and international trends, and to see if there's differences or similarities. A lot of my work is international too, and I'm curious to think about how what we're seeing in the United States compares internationally. So if you're interested in that, please email me. There's just a couple of spots left, and we're meeting tomorrow night for the second session. We already had one session, so things are already moving along. So for this next part of the class, we wanted to give you a chance to learn a little bit more from three of us, and also give you a glimpse into some different pathways that you could take to get into food systems work. So I'm going to speak for about 10 minutes, and then Jerry, and then hopefully Devita. Devita Davison is also part of our leadership team, and she's coming in soon, but we think embodies kind of the food systems work that a lot of our speakers embody. And she's going to give you she's going to talk for a little bit longer, for about 20 minutes, and give you a sense of the kinds of lectures you're going to be hearing for the rest of the semester. I want to tell you a little bit about my own journey, my own path to doing food systems work. And through this, in general, for this class, we want to give you all a sense of the multiple pathways that you might take to end up doing work on food systems. Some of you in this room probably already know you're 100% committed, you're going to do work on food systems. And among you, some of you might already have a very clear idea of exactly what you want to do. While others of you, which I've seen in a lot of my food systems classes, are probably incredibly overwhelmed and have no idea where to begin. You know there's lots of issues in the food system, and you're trying to figure out, get your bearings and trying to figure out, where do you start? How do you tackle transforming the food system? But a lot of you, considering that so many of you have not ever taken a food systems course before, I assume are probably here because you're just curious. You know nothing about food systems. You thought this was an interesting class. You heard about it. And for you, especially, I'm hoping that this class will actually have you, by the end of the class, leave thinking and recognizing that there are multiple ways that food systems are probably going to intersect with whatever career path you end up following. In part, I want to show you not only the variety of ways that you can work on food systems, but for how you should be thinking and why you should have this food literacy lens as you go through in life. So for me, it was probably, if you started to look at my early childhood and teen years, you might have assumed that I would end up in food systems work. I grew up in Bolivia with parents who were there for 13 and 17 years. They had me there. And my father was working with farmers who were moving down from the mountains and looking for land that the government was redistributing. But many of these were miners who had lost their jobs in the mines, or who didn't have land anymore that they could access from their small family plots. And they were coming down to the lowlands and needed support to learn how to farm sustainably, although there weren't a lot of practices in place and knowledge about how to farm sustainably in the tropical Amazon where we were living. So I lived there until I was 8, and then when we moved to the United States, I lived again on a farm for 4 years in western Pennsylvania. And then after that, when my family moved to Arkansas, my father worked for Heifer International, and so I was part of this small community at the time, a small international organization working around the world with small-scale farmers, trying to address issues of food insecurity, environmental degradation, trying to support them to support their livelihoods. After about 18, though, food just kind of dissipated from my life, and I didn't think about it at all. And I explored all sorts of different careers, studied, explored, tried out things around art therapy. I did outdoor education. I did psychology research and child psychology, program evaluation, conservation ecology. And it wasn't until I finally did AmeriCorps, just because I wanted to do something interesting, and I went to the Heifer International Ranch in Arkansas that has an experiential education farm where they teach pre-K through seniors about global hunger and poverty. And that's really what solidified for me that that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to do something related to food systems. That was one decision, but then I had to decide, well, how was I going to do that? And I think the reason I set on food systems is I realized it actually brought together all those different interests that to me seemed really disparate and disconnected. So I started recognizing that food systems is an amazing way to do something that requires creativity. It's there's so many complex issues in food systems. You need innovation and creative thinking to solve a lot of the problems we see in our food system. It gave me a chance to really incorporate my interest in doing something related to the environment. And it gave me a chance to do something related to evaluation and research. And I wanted to have a career where I felt like I was very directly and immediately affecting people's lives, quality of life, and livelihoods. So once I figured out I wanted to do something on food systems, like many of you, I really wasn't sure exactly how I was going to try to do that kind of work. So there's certainly the personal level. On a very personal level, I could have worked in another career, and then just from my own personal choices, could have decided what foods I would buy, what farmers I would support, and make an impact that way, which I certainly have tried to do. But to make it a career, at first, I just wanted to do something where I felt like I was making a difference in at least one person's life, and I was especially interested in food insecurity. But as I started to study it more in college and in grad school, I started recognizing just how wide-scaled and problematic food security is around the world. And so I started moving towards, naturally back to what my father had done, working with an NGO, and wanting to do community-based work around food insecurity. I worked with a number of NGOs in a number of different ways, and it was satisfying in some ways, but then I started, as I was also in grad school, started recognizing how often sometimes NGO work can be remarkable, but it can often be a Band-Aid solution that can be undermined by local, by state, by national, and by global policies and trends. And so I also started going deeper into graduate school, and I started learning about the history of colonialism, imperialism, capitalism, global trade, especially about the impact that economic policies in the United States have had, for long had, on resource-poor farmers and food insecurity, and actually causing them to be resource-poor. If you look at the history in Haiti, Guatemala, Mexico, Congo, Laos, and the list goes on. And so I actually started realizing I needed to also do some work here in the United States, where so much of the source of many of our global problems are. But it gave me that realization that this is an interconnected, wide-scale problem that goes from the very local to the global level. So all that brought me back to where I am today, where I focus on all of these aspects of food systems in some way. So trying to keep in check my own role in my own food system and the part that I play in a very personal way, as well as working on research, especially action research, that I hope will hopefully have an impact on individuals, on households, on communities, on institutions I work with, and as well as the larger policy context. So I have done work on SNAP, on food stamps and its effects on individuals, and the nonprofits that have to step in as our local and state and national governments continue to retrench and pull away from the social services and support systems that we offer communities. I've done that here in Washtenaw County. I've done work at the state level on policy councils and food hubs, on trying to think about how we can build their capacity to try to address issues of food inequities. I've done work in Bolivia since 2007, beginning with national level policy to try to address malnutrition and thinking about the micropolitics. So what happens when a policy is implemented? Because that's where it often breaks down, not in just passing the policy. And now I'm doing work on the double burden of nutrition in Bolivia, trying to understand why we have persistent malnutrition alongside obesity and overweight and all the different factors that are causing that. And that we're trying to turn into policy action in the next few years. And finally, I'm doing work in Vietnam and Kenya, trying to understand this idea of sustainable diets, which is a really lofty, interesting concept that many scholars and many governments have even embraced, but we don't know on the ground. What does it mean for decision makers who really want to implement this idea? What information do they need? What collaborations do they need? And how can we, again, build their capacity to link food system initiatives that not only have an impact on our nutrition and diet, but also livelihoods and on the environment. So ultimately, to kind of sum up, this is why I think food systems is an amazing area to work in, because it allows us to constantly move in and out of the local, the national, the global scales. It's a field that needs and it allows for action from the very personal to the local, to the national, to the global. Once we begin, and I hope once you begin to have food literacy, and for those of you that already know a lot about food systems, I am sure you're going to go even further, as I will throughout the semester. But especially as you begin to have food literacy, I guarantee you, you're going to start to see food systems everywhere. And the beauty is whatever path you choose, whether you become doctors, engineers, therapists, teachers, researchers, journalists, urban planners, international development workers, real estate developers, one way or another, whatever field you go into, food systems will somehow intersect with the work you do. And more importantly, once you put on that food systems lens, you can better ensure that the work you do begins to support instead of unintentionally impeding efforts to transform our food system. So we need each and every one of you involved if we expect to shift the food system towards greater equity, health, and ecological sustainability. And I hope you can find the role that you want and can play as you take this course for the rest of the semester. And for community members in the room, I hope that you get more ideas to inspire and to lift up the work that you are already doing. Thanks.
Can you hear me? Okay, good deal. Do I use this? There it is. So again, I'm Ann Hebron from Oakland Avenue Urban Farm. We're located in the city of Detroit. And I got to tell you that when I've been involved in food systems work at the community level for 10 years, since 2008. Prior to 2008, I was a real estate broker, selling real estate in Wayne County, Washtenaw County, Monroe County, Oakland County, and Macomb County. And had a really awesome career. I also had a dual career because I worked as well for the Third Judicial Circuit Court. So 30 years later, when I retire from the court system and went full-time into real estate, opening my own office, things were looking really, really good. And then 2008, we all know what happened. The mortgage industry collapsed, and it put a lot of brokers and realtors out of business. And we had to figure out something else to do. It was at that time that I was asked to come into the north end part of Detroit, where I work now, to kind of figure out what's going on in this neighborhood. It had been socially and economically disinvested, industry-wise. No retail, housing was very decayed, and there was a lot of vacant land. And so at that time, when I came over to look at the area and seeing the vacancy, being a realtor, I saw opportunity. But it was still troubling because driving around the neighborhood, I didn't see the infrastructure that people need. I didn't see supermarkets. I didn't see coffee shops. I didn't see quality housing. The school system, they were closing. And there was people were not connected to each other. And so at that particular time, there was a very aggressive food system, food justice movement happening. And when I walked into the one grocery store in the neighborhood and I looked at what they were selling, it was appalling to me. There was a liquor store on both sides of where I work now, and people were shopping there for food, and it was food that I wouldn't feed my dogs. But at that time, that's when I got slapped in the face with my own privilege that I had been enjoying, and that was the privilege to be able to go and shop wherever I wanted to shop for food. And so hence that's when I started my work and my journey along this way with what can I do as an individual and with our organization to make changes in our community, hoping that we were able to make healthier food accessible for people in the community. Now, it wasn't easy to start food systems work looking at it from a community development lens because there were so many policy issues. It wasn't legal to grow food within the city of Detroit. They referred to us as gangster growers. We would just see vacant land and say, okay, we're gonna grow some food on that. We're gonna develop this. This land is available, nobody cares about it, we're just gonna take it over. And that's what the movement was. But what happened with that is communities became stronger, our neighborhoods became safer, people wanted to come in to the environments that we were working in to connect to each other. And of course, today, it's a different narrative. Now, I gotta tell you a little bit more about myself. Growing up in the South, I was born in Lebanon, Tennessee. All of my family were farmers and had farmland. We migrated to Detroit during the Great Migration in the 50s. And we moved to Black Bottom, Detroit, where is where most black people landed in the city of Detroit. It was called Black Bottom not because African Americans lived there, it was called Black Bottom because of the rich soil that was there, like compost. And so everybody grew something. Everybody was growing some type of food and sharing it. So that's the environment that I grew up in. And I remember my grandfather's tomatoes and green beans. And I remember that everything that we ate during the winter basically came from the gardens that my family grew food on. And then we moved into the North End, and then we continued the movement west. And again, as I grew up, I became disconnected to the food, thinking about food. I had to eat, I fed my children, but I wasn't really focused on where the food came from, how it was grown, or anything like that. It was not until I came back into the North End in 2008 that I realized there's a problem with the food systems here. There's a problem with what people are eating and what's accessible to them. And there's an equity imbalance between people in the city and people in the suburbs. So we need to change that. We need to put some things in place to improve that. So we started doing our work in the North End by opening up a farmer's market. Now, people said to me, nobody is going to come and shop in the North End. We have no jobs, we have no food. A lot of people are receiving food assistance and they're not going to shop. But we have vendors that were willing to come and sell their produce and connect to people. Eastern Market is one of our vendors because they believed in the mission and the goal of providing increased access for people at the community level. We have a very viable youth involvement at our farm. Everything that we do is about the young people, but we're also connected to community education. What we found is that there is a nutrition gap for folks in community because they don't have the right access. And so we had to retrain people and, reteach people how to eat better by making sure that they had access to the same quality of food that we sell to restaurants. So what you see to the left, those heirloom tomatoes that we sell at restaurants, to restaurants, we made sure that folks in community had the same access to that. That's a rarity, and that's something that people were not used to, but that's something that people want, and they like it. This group of kids here are from Toronto. They were they're Latino kids that were visiting the farm via Toronto, and they were very interested in not only what the farm is doing in terms of community development, but how it's connecting to the young people. And so it was interesting to them that when they walked around our neighborhood, they didn't see a built-up infrastructure coming from someplace like Toronto. And so they wanted to know, what are we doing? How are we doing? And that was part of their study and research that they took back. Again, to the left is pictures of our farm, a small area of our farm, but it's also our farm-to-table dinner that we host at the farm, where we bring people in to enjoy meals that are prepared by chefs that we work with, but the food is grown at the farm. And again, making sure that we have the highest and best quality of food that we can offer to people in the community. This is a picture of a chicken coop. We now have chickens, and again, chickens are not legal. Livestock is not legal. I know in other cities, other counties, you can have chickens, and it's no big deal, but in Detroit, it's not legal. But we have 24. And they're laying eggs, and again, protein source for folks in our community, but it's also connecting folks and our children back to the ecosystem of how livestock and people can coexist together. I want to say that in Detroit, we had and still have an issue with land being able to be sold to people who are growing food, and that causes a little bit of an insecurity for our growers working in Detroit. We happen to own 6 acres in this entire block, but we have been very supportive in working with the urban agricultural planners, urban planners, to make sure that there is a process. Well, first of all, we had to work to make it legal, that it was okay to grow food in Detroit, and that happened in 2013. But now we're working on the livestock ordinance, because again, that's also very important for a lot of reasons. For example, with chickens, we know that chickens eat food waste, and that chickens contribute to the compost procedures and compost materials that we need to grow our food. And so that's a closed loop within that ecosystem that we need. And so we're working with the urban planners to build the case that we can have areas where it's protected for the animals and for humans to live in a residential area. Our children, and you see most of those are young men, are shelling peas. But what's important about this is that they're shelling peas. You notice they're not holding cell phones and they're not texting. They're very focused. They're talking to each other. They're calm. They're very dedicated to making sure that the peas go in the bowl and not on the floor or on the ground, because they know that that is food that is going to be consumed. But they also know that it's going to bring income back to the farm to support their programs. And so this is part of the education learning that we do. And they also harvested these strawberries that we grow at the farm, that we make a value-added product called Afro Jam that is sold at our farmers market. There's the chicken. These are students, I think these students are from U of M. We get a lot of students from U of M that come to our farm that do research and learning. As you see in the back, we have 2 hoop houses that help us to extend our growing season, because we do have a need to have food during the winter months. And so those hoop houses help us to be able to extend the season out a little bit more. We are building another hoop house in March, and any of you who want to come and get your hands dirty, we'd love to have you. There are the girls. That was their first day at the farm. We're very committed to our community outreach and how we work inside community. So I mentioned that we use urban farming as a tool for community development. In the North End, where we work, and I'll say any Detroit neighborhood was like this, we had a high vacancy rate. Many of our schools, public schools, have closed. Our neighborhoods were not safe. People did not feel safe. People were not connected to each other. And so we would hear comments like, oh, the city needs to come and cut the grass. The city needs to do this. Well, our work changed that. Our work is what brought unity into our neighborhoods, where we who lived in our community, who live in our communities, came together and said, we are going to do this ourselves. So we take care of our land, we take care of our streets, we create these beautiful green spaces where children and our seniors can walk. So we're looking, you hear the term walkable neighborhoods. We're creating these walkable neighborhoods where people can come out and connect to each other again. And we do that in a variety of ways. So we have workshops like come and build a rain barrel, working with the Sierra Club. And actually these rain barrels go out into the neighborhood free. But what happens is people get together and they start working with each other and teaching each other, helping each other through a process of building a rain barrel and then talking about how to use that rain barrel when they get home and what the benefits are. So education is one thing we look at. North End Pride is our community coming together, working together to clean up our neighborhood. And we will do that again in the spring because we have to do spring cleaning. But these events have been very instrumental in terms of helping people understand that we all have a vested interest in our neighborhoods and that we have to work together to sustain our neighborhoods. What you see here are two of our seniors coming to get food, and I'm getting the warning. And Miss Lucy is our neighbor who made a contribution to the seniors for some of these bags and things like that that we give them. But all this stuff came from the farm. That's Kiki, who helps build or package the food to go out to the CSA. These are all students from University of Michigan, and again, that was a work group and a study group, but over to the left, that's a community meeting. And these are the types of things that we do to bring people together. So food is what is the tool that we use for community development. And I want to encourage you at the community level, but also at the educational level, to think in terms of that, because everybody has to eat. But the way that you access that food is important, and we all have to make sure that it is available to everybody equally. Thank you.
Oh, gosh. Testing, testing. Oh, it works, it works, it works, yes. So good evening, everyone. I'm sorry I came in a little late. I'm actually coming from Chicago, and I didn't realize that, I did realize it, but I forgot. Chicago was on Central Time. Michigan is on Eastern Standard Time. And so just because it's 2 o'clock in Chicago, don't mean it's 2 o'clock in Michigan. It's actually 3 o'clock in Michigan. And so I'm running a little late because I got my times mixed up. But is there a clicker? This is my clicker? Okay, this is my clicker. All right. Let me introduce myself and tell you guys what a privilege it is for me to be here to kick off this workshop. My name is Devita Davison, and I am the executive director of a nonprofit in Detroit called Food Lab Detroit. And Food Lab is a nonprofit that is community-based that supports over 200 locally owned food entrepreneurs, restaurateurs, bakers, food producers, chefs. We help those entrepreneurs start, operate sustainably, and scale and grow their business. Now, Mama Jerry, it's a little bit hard to follow you, but I'm going to do my best to kind of bring us home in terms of understanding why we named this workshop series Planting Seeds of Resistance. And if you don't mind, for the next 15 or so minutes, what I want to do is to not only tell you about the work that I do at Food Lab Detroit, but I want to tell you why we do the work that we do at Food Lab Detroit, because I think that's most important as we begin to kick off this workshop series. But let's start with this title. I'm going to try to get through this, y'all, because this is going to get a little emotional for me. While we name this workshop series, Planting Seeds of Resistance. As a little black girl born and raised in the 70s on the northwest side of Detroit, when I think of planting seeds, I can't help but to think about my ancestors. My ancestors who hid seeds, who hid rice, who hid hope in their hair and in their children's hair as they boarded the transatlantic slave ships to a new world. I'm gonna see if this video is gonna work. Here's an article from Essence magazine.
Dan zet ik het op Marion
This
hoofd.
is the art.
Zet het hier. En Marion hoofd, je hoeft niet veel
Getting
te
ready to
hebben.
go
Als je dat een beetje
to the
hebt,
bowels
blijft
of the
het
slave ships
hierin. Zo had
to a
ze het
new
gedaan.
world where they did not know if they were
En
going
had
to
ze
make
dat, waar had ze dat gedaan, Edith? Op
They
het
didn't know they
slavenschip
were gonna
of in
survive.
Paramaribo of in Afrika?
In Afrika.
Oké.
Ja, want we hebben het vandaag
Ja.
al meegenomen. En dan had ze haar gevlochten. Het zit al erin. En dan gaat ze dan vlechten.
But what they did was they planted seeds.
Zo.
They hid
Zie je?
rice grain
Is dit?
in their
Zo
hair.
was het gebeurd. En was het
Wow.
gedaan.
What we now know as
Zo gedaan.
So you all have to understand when this workshop series, Planting Seeds of Resistance, came up around the table as we were thinking about it. This meant a lot to me. Because planting seeds of resistance means that, yes, they hid rice seeds in their children's hair and in their hair. But more importantly, what this means to me, and it's why I do the work that I do, is because through it all, y'all understand, I want you all to understand what it means when someone is about to get on a slave ship and what they think about when they are putting seeds in their hair. That means that I'm going to survive. I'm going to make it. And my future is going to be dependent on the soil. What? I do this work because my ancestors thought about my unborn body 400 years ago. They thought enough about me, their descendants, to prepare themselves for the terror that they were about to face in a new world. Y'all understand that? And so when I think about this planting seeds of resistance, not only do I think about the preparation that took place, I thought to myself, by God, 400 years later, and we celebrate 400 years in 2019, by the way, when the first slaves landed in Virginia. This is the year. I thought about, by God, 400 years, I'm still here. That means that along the way, that they had some tools, some resources, some survival strategies that got us through. So planting seeds of resistance to me also means, how am I also practicing the survival strategies that they left for me to follow? So let's talk about this for a second. I'm gonna try to go through the course of history, if you all will allow me to. So not only did my, listen, mother's mother, who was a slave, make the transition from Africa to the America, which turned the tide of this country. The backs of slaves, as you all know, built this country, particularly agriculture. But here's the thing, my family was in constant, what I call a migratory pattern, either unwilling or willing. And because my ancestors thought enough about their unborn children, 4 centuries later, my mother, who was a descendant of a slave, she was able to make a migratory pattern, not by force, but by choice. See, my mother, and along with my father, were a part of a different migratory pattern for black folks. Not the transatlantic slave trade, but something that was called the Great Migration. The Great Migration is between 1910 and 1970. For the first time in history, over 6 million descendants of slaves made a move by choice. They moved from the southern states to the north. And they carried with them not seeds, but hope, determination, vision, faith for a better way of life. So mommy and daddy, my mother and father, in 1965, moved from Alabama, the rural south of Selma, to Detroit. And Detroit is the place where I was born and raised, and I call myself a very proud Detroiter. And so, Mama Jerry, as you talked about the work that you do over at Oakland Avenue Farm, I want to first take folks in this room back a little bit to have them understand that when people think about Detroit as this city of currently under a little bit of 700,000 folks. When my mother and father moved there, it was a population of 1.5 million. Right now it's about under 700,000. When people think about Detroit now in present day and they think it's a city of just poor black people who couldn't govern themselves, you hear bad things about Detroit. It's poor. There's crime. The schools are closing. There's blight. But I came into the auditorium to tell you that you all have to understand policy to understand why Detroit is the way that it is. And I steep you in history in the beginning of my talk because I want you to know that great American cities where the majority of the population is black and brown bodies, be it Detroit or Chicago or Harlem, New York, or Oakland, California, or St. Louis or Cleveland, you all have to understand that the policies in these northern cities were created as a result of 90% of African Americans in the 19th century lived in the South. After the Great Migration, over half of them were living in the North. Policies were created as a result and as a reaction of black folks moving north. So when people start to talk about Detroit and the conditions in which it is in today, they need to be educated and understand the policies that created those conditions. Yeah? So let's talk about a little bit of those policies that created the conditions. And so in this picture, you might see, I love this picture, because in so many situations where people see blight and people see abandonment, Detroiters saw opportunity. They saw a way, as many of my great ancestors used to say, out of no way. And then you see in this picture, you see this garden here, growing food. Oh my God, and then you see the light. Then you see the light in the background. As to say, this is ordained. This is what you're supposed to do. Here's the sun. Here, right here is a ray of hope. And see, what folks don't understand is a couple of things happened in Detroit. The first thing that happened in Detroit as folks were moving from the south to the north is that if you all understand, there was a policy, and I know y'all can't believe this. You wouldn't believe this. That was called restrictive covenants. It was a policy. And all across northern cities, restricted covenants meant that black people couldn't move into white neighborhoods. Now, if you're old enough, or if you've done your history, you know what I'm talking about. Let me give you a real world example. We hear a lot about this another migratory pattern that's called white flight. Happened after probably the '67 rebellion kind of expedited the white flight when white folks left the city of Detroit and was moving out to the suburbs. My mother and father left Detroit in the late '80s and moved out to the suburbs, a suburb that's called Southfield, Michigan. I'll never forget when my mother and father were looking for a house to buy in Southfield, Michigan, even in the late '80s. One day, Daddy came home. He was so angry. He said, "I'm building my own damn house." I said, "Daddy, what?" I'm too young. I really didn't understand what was going on. But apparently, the house that my mother fell in love with, the deed said, "Do not sell to a Negro family." And so my mother and father were not able to buy that home. Restricted covenants. Even though black folks for the first time stepped out through the great migration period and moved from the south to the north, even when they got to the north, there were only certain places that they could live, certain places where they could move to. And so you now have a concentration of black folks that can only live in a certain community. That was restricted. But it gets even better. You all might hear of this terminology that was created by the USDA. I don't like to use the term. Most folks, myself, Mama Jerry, Winona, who work in food movements, we don't use the word food deserts. It's a word that was created by the USDA. We refer to it as food apartheid because we know that these neighborhoods aren't desert. Hell, I'm showing you right now food that's growing. So it's not barren. It wasn't something that happened by nature. This is something as a direct result of policy. And so I show you this picture, too, of this abandoned house, because not only was there restrictive covenants that was created, but there was also something that was called redlining. That there was a time, and still today this happens, that they decided that there were some neighborhoods that the federal government was going to invest in through mortgages and home improvements, and then there were some neighborhoods that they weren't going to do that. And they literally drew red lines around those neighborhoods. So when Mama Jerry talked about the fact that the people in her community said, you know what, we're not going to wait on government to cut the grass, so we're not going to wait on the government to provide us with food. We're not going to wait on the government. It's because black folks know that if we waited on the government in the city of Detroit, we literally would be dead. And I don't say that hyperbolically either. You all will understand that, Mama Jerry, I do believe it was in the late 1980s, maybe early 90s, when the last grocery store left Detroit. It's called Farmer Jack's. Left. A city of almost 1 million people, no major grocery store in the city. But thank God for those ancestors who migrated from the south to the north. Thank God for them, because they said, babies, don't worry. We got you. Because if one thing we know how to do, we know how to grow food. We'll grow our own damn food. Let the grocery stores leave. Seeds of resistance. Our ancestors didn't even know when they were putting those seeds in their hair from the transatlantic slave trade that those same skill sets that they learned in the soil when they were slaves would keep me to this day. Because my mama and daddy know how to grow. And they learned that from their daddy, who learned it from his mama, who learned it from his mama. Planting seeds of resistance. Knowing how to grow food is a tool, a mechanism of resistance, because now you are in control of your own food. So not only do we know how to grow our own food, but, it kills me too that I have to talk to some of the entrepreneurs, even in Food Lab, because I operate in the spirit that we once had our own stores in Detroit as well. This is Black Star Market and Groceries. And I think about what was the policy that affected the city of Detroit, specifically that neighborhood where the majority of black folks were living. Again, I told you the concentration of black bodies in certain neighborhoods. In Detroit, we called that neighborhood Black Bottom. That's right. What happened to all of these stores that were flourishing in these communities and neighborhoods? We had our own grocery stores. We had our own businesses. We had our own restaurants. What happened? Policy. Policy happened. Check it out. You got 6 million African Americans migrating from the South to the North. When they get to the North, they are only able to live in certain communities and neighborhoods. So now you have a concentration of black bodies only in certain neighborhoods. Usually these neighborhoods are overly populated because they can't move anyplace else. So the government thought, oh, you know what we're going to do? We're going to clean these neighborhoods up. It's a policy that was created called the Urban Renewal Program. And the Urban Renewal Program, this was in 1949, came through and said, you know what? We're going to clean up the cities. We're going to make it a better place to live. But instead, what the Urban Renewal Program was all about, it was all about building freeways. It was all about building freeways from the city, which is usually the downtown core where people worked, to what they were building out now, which was called the suburbs. And so they had to find a way for folks to easily get between the city and the suburbs. Mind you, who was moving out to the suburbs? White people. I told you, white flight. And so you can't have them move out to the suburbs without having a way for them to get back to work in the cities. So they created the Urban Renewal Program, federal funding, that they said that they were going to clean up African American communities and neighborhoods, but they drove freeways right through those communities and destroyed black businesses and black homes. As I enter this and I tell y'all these stories, because I need for you all to understand that this is how I think about the work that I do in the food movement. I think about the work that I do in the food movement from a racial justice lens. Because racism, institutional and structural, is all in and throughout our food system. Really, Devita? It is? Well, of course it is. I'll tell you why. Because if you look at who has access to food and who is disproportionately impacted by disease-related illnesses, diabetes, high blood pressure, obesity, cancer, it's black communities that have been suffering under redlining and whose communities were destroyed during the urban renewal period. I mean, it's fact. Listen, if you look at who owns the land, and depending on the census, over 95%, some people say 98%, of rural land is owned by white folks. I mean, here, wait a minute. If you look at labor laws, you'll understand that in labor laws, we have a whole different set of labor laws for two industries, just two industry sectors. Farmers and people who work in the restaurant industry. Two sets of labor laws. You say, Devita, what are you talking about, restaurant industry? Oh, I knew you weren't going to ask me that question. I wonder how many people know that in the restaurant industry particularly, there is a wage that is called the tip wage, where you have tip wage workers in restaurants. And I wonder how many of those folks who know about tip wage workers understand that tip wage working is rooted in slavery. It comes out of slavery. And so here's the thing. Tipping actually didn't even start in the United States of America. Tipping actually began in Europe. And when it came over to the United States of America, Americans actually thought it was undemocratic. Like, what? No, we don't even, there was a powerful anti-tipping movement because Americans just felt really deeply uncomfortable with the fact of why do we as consumers have to pay workers? Why aren't employers paying workers? And so Americans at one point in time in this country pushed back against tipping very, very hard. But there were two industries who pushed forward, and that was the restaurant industry, and that was the railway industry. And that is because those two industries particularly are where black folks went to work as they were coming out of slavery. And those employers didn't want to pay them, they wanted the customers to pay them instead. And to this day, we are still living with the policy of tip wage workers. So this whole food system is rooted in institutional and structural racism. But here's the thing. I tell you this, and I root all of this in a bit of history. Am I moving forward? Oh, maybe, okay. No? I'm doing too much? All right. Here we go. I tell you all of this, but I am going to just wrap up by saying this much. I wanted to root you in a little bit of policy. I wanted you to understand how our food system is rooted very much so in institutional structural racism. And I hope that even if you're taking the course or even if you're visiting this course for the first time, I hope you'll stay with us through the series. Because what this course is really going to be about is about introducing you to speakers and introducing you to language, introducing you to strategies, introducing you to tools, introducing you to resources of people who are very well aware of the structural and institutional racism that sits in our food system, but every day are dismantling that and making our food system equitable and just and healthy and sustainable and delicious for everybody. And so I know this. And the reason why I know this is because I know the power of food. It was Grace Lee Boggs who said that in order to make change, we need to start a revolution. And a revolution is based on people exercising their creativity in the midst of devastation. And I show you this picture of my family at our family restaurant down in Selma, Alabama. It's my grandmother, my grandfather, and my aunt. And I know about the magic of creativity because I was born into a family of extraordinary Southern cooks who were obsessively preoccupied with food. And the little bit that they had, they showed enormous creativity. And they crafted these dishes that were made from the fresh produce that they grew out in the farm. They crafted these dishes, y'all call it, or the fancy chefs that I work with call it, nose to tail dining. What's that y'all say that is? Oh, Devita, we're gonna take the whole pig and, we're gonna use the whole pig. We're going to use his nose and its snout, and we're going to use the ears, and we're going to, just nose to tail, everything. I said, oh, this is new? Oh, y'all doing something new? No, the only new thing is that y'all charging people hundreds of dollars for this because Big Mama and them was doing this for a long time. Okay, the pig didn't have a chance in my family's house. It was so bad we ate the brains and called it hoghead cheese. We ate the intestines and called it chitlins. So now y'all calling it nose to tail dining. Oh, okay. That's cute. Okay. And so what I know is that they have shown us the strategies. One of the strategies that my family showed me, even through this kitchen, is the power of owning a restaurant. I think that's why I'm so passionate about the work that I do at Food Lab Detroit in terms of helping folks incubate food-related businesses, because my grandmother and grandfather had very little. My grandfather was a coal miner. In addition to owning a restaurant, my grandmother was a domestic in addition to owning a restaurant. They raised 11 children. All 11 children then went off to college. Those 11 children had 32 children. Those 32 children then went out to college. Don't tell me the power and the magic of what two people did who barely graduated from high school, whose mother and fathers were slaves, who worked and had a restaurant. Don't tell me what they can't do 3 generations later. I wouldn't be standing here in front of y'all today if it had not been for those people in that picture. Magic. Magic. It was powerful. And so not only was that magical, but there are so many people who understand and was able to make this connection between food and resistance. I think about organizers in the South, the Southern Tenant Farmers Union. You know, they had a rich union. In 1936, I wrote this. There was a union in Texas, in Missouri, in Tennessee, and Oklahoma. And what I love about STFU is that they were the first union of farmers who was black and white farming families. They came together. And so it was power in coming together. And what I love about that, and see, y'all don't understand, all of these tools and strategies that I learned from my ancestors is the tools and strategies that I use today at Food Lab Detroit. And so even though I run an incubator and accelerator and help people launch and scale their business, I'm simultaneously also organizing and building a movement. And so at Food Lab, this is a picture. We gather black and white and Southeast Asian, men and women, young and old, and we talk. We talk about food. We talk at workshops. We talk at kitchens. We talk at roundtable discussions. But more importantly, what we do is we talk about and we reference systemic and institutional racism when we talk. We have conversations about income inequality. And I know that some of the conversations that we have at Food Lab may be uncomfortable, but I have to encourage dialogue. I have to create a welcoming environment because I need people to understand and be in community with other people who may not look like them, who are also impacted by the food system. I also love the fact that it was Martin Luther King who taught us the power of visioning and the power of community and the power that he talked about in the process that we have to have humanity. And so even though Food Lab is again, incubator and accelerator, and we are, I would like to say, not your typical business support organization, because there has to be a certain amount of humanity that is brought into the organization. People need to understand that they're not only building businesses for the sake of building a business where profit is the only concern. We try to help people incubate businesses where they're thinking about 3 bottom lines, not just about making money and scaling and growing and making as much money as they can. But how are you taking care of your people, your employees? How are you taking care of yourself? How are you taking care of the planet? And so when Food Lab members see each other, we don't give each other handshakes and a business card. We greet each other with a hug. Because we want you to know, I see you. I see you as a human. Because the only way we're going to solve the problems of this food system is if we see the humanity in us all. We have to do that. And so at Food Lab, it's really important that we all have humanity in the way that we work and we operate. And then I think the last thing that is important as we talk about improving the food system, is if we talk about resistance, is we can't do any of this work without having faith. I'm the daughter of a preacher who was the son of a preacher who was the son of a preacher. And so I know a little bit about how Daddy and Grandpa used to preach about faith. Not only did I hear them preach about it, but I try to practice that faith. And I, again, bring this back full circle from when I talked about the transatlantic slave ships boarding my ancestors in the bows and the bellies of those ships. Man, to where we are today. I think about the times that my mother and father and 6 million African Americans migrated from the south to the north. But there was a time in which another one of my ancestors, Harriet Tubman was her name. And even though the Great Migration wasn't happening, she was taking slaves and helping them go from the south to the north. I want to have that kind of faith, that Harriet Tubman kind of faith, to lead hundreds of slaves from freedom through what we call this Underground Railroad. I want you to have that kind of faith, the kind of faith that gives you courage to face the uncertainties of the future. Y'all, we living in some dangerous times. I'm scared. Some of us in the room are uncertain about what our future is going to look like. It's all right to be afraid, but I have faith that even in these uncertain times that we're living in, we're going to be all right. I want to have the faith that will continue to give me strength to get up every day and fight for people who I don't even know, because I know that there was a time when somebody fought for me. I can tell you, I got a little emotional at Hartsfield Airport yesterday as I was getting on a plane flying from Atlanta to Chicago. I was in line, TSA, and I said to the young lady who asked me for my ID and for my passport, I said, "Sis, you get paid on Friday?" She said, "No, I didn't get paid." I said, "You working for free right now?" She said, "Yeah." I don't know if it was appropriate or not, but I just went into my bag and grabbed a little something that I had in my wallet. And I said, "I'm praying for you. There's a whole bunch of people out here that's praying for y'all, that's fighting for y'all. But there are people right now working in this country for free that's not getting paid, that's doing the work." That's emotional to me because I come from people who used to do work for free. And so as I got on the plane, I thought about the fact that I'm in a plane 35,000 feet in the air trying to get from Atlanta to Chicago, and the men and women that's supposed to be guiding this plane called air traffic controller, they're not getting paid. I'm putting my life in somebody's hands that's not getting paid to do the job that they do. But I thought about my ancestors who fought for me. So I wake up every day, y'all, and I fight. I fight for people. Because at the end of the day, we all in this thing together. And so what I want y'all to do is for the next, how many weeks we got, Lily? We got what? 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks? We got what? to hear from more speakers who are fighting a good fight. But here's what I want to leave you all with is when our days become dreary and our nights become dark, hold fast to faith. Hold fast to hope. Hold fast to love. Knowing that we are living in the turmoil of genuine civilization, struggling to be born. But we'll get there. All right?